When you think about learning Spanish verbs, does the idea of endless conjugation list, tenses, moods, reflexive this, and stem changing that come to mind? If so, then let me tell you, you are way more advanced in your knowledge than I was during 99%, the big bulk of my Spanish learning. In fact, I was able to communicate with no problem, work as a medical interpreter, excel in all of the exams required for that, and I seriously doubt I could have explicitly told you what the imperative mood was or give you an example of a stem changing verb off the top of my head. Now, don't get me wrong, understanding how verbs are categorized certainly can be useful to help us put a name on our trouble spots and be able to focus on improving. But if your primary goal is effective communication and you are more interested in that than memorizing the rules in your textbook, then let me tell you how I have always viewed Spanish verbs. Maybe seeing it from this point of view will help you guys out as well. Comencemos, amigos. Hola mis queridos líderes del lenguaje, bienvenidos a otro video. Si es la primera vez que tú y yo nos estamos conociendo, te doy la bienvenida. Yo me llamo Erika. Aquí te ayudamos a aprender a hablar español con confianza y a crear una rutina de aprendizaje irresistible a través de las historias y conversaciones auténticas. Si eso te parece interesante, pues suscríbete para no perderte de nada. Alright guys, so we often see learning vocabulary as something that we can put on this side, and then the grammar part as something that's completely different, and we're going to put it on this side. And so we think of them as two different things, and we may investigate the best way to learn vocabulary and the best way to learn grammar, and it seems logical, and I've certainly separated the two things as well often when I've talked about these parts of the language. But what if we actually remembered that, for example, verb conjugations are simply more vocabulary words? They're simply more words in Spanish. It's not a separate, mysterious beast. They're just a list of more words that you need to learn in Spanish. Wouldn't that help us understand that the techniques that we use to acquire vocabulary, we can also use to acquire the verb conjugation? So what are some of these effective techniques for learning vocabulary? Let's see one of them that I've shared with you guys a few times before. Comencemos con número 1. Comienza con una fuente de información, ya sea para leerla o escucharla, que se trate de un tema interesante o necesario para ti. Yo siempre recomiendo aprender a base de temas por muchas razones, pero una de ellas es porque esto les va a ayudar a retener mejor el vocabulario. All right, drop me a comment below to let me know if that makes sense. Learning in context, learning in theme-based context. Does that seem like something that you could try to learn vocabulary better? You can tell me estoy de acuerdo if you agree, or no estoy de acuerdo if you don't agree. Okay, so that's vocabulary. But if we remember that Spanish verbs are just more words, okay? They're just another set of words that we need to remember, then can't we apply the exact same thing? In fact, verbs have an advantage over regular vocabulary because there are patterns that we can notice. We've all seen the patterns when we look at a conjugation chart. So instead of thinking, oh my goodness, there are so many endings to remember, oh my goodness, this verb changes so much when we put it in a different mood, when it's in the imperative, when it's in the subjunctive. Just think of these all as different vocabulary words that you need to learn when you need them. And focus on what you need right now. In my case, since I was so blissfully ignorant of a lot of the grammar rules and the names of things, I was simply filling in gaps of knowledge that I needed as I went. As I was outputting, as I was writing, as I was speaking, I would notice what words I was lacking. I didn't really really try to categorize them. I would simply notice what I was lacking and fill in those gaps, sometimes intentionally, or sometimes I would fill them in mentally as I was listening or reading, because that's where you see the language demonstrated right in front of you. And if you're practicing enough, then it's easier to take that input and output it in a correct way without explicitly studying the grammar so much or at all. Let's think of an example. Let's say that you are talking about what you did yesterday and you've forgotten how to say I did. And so you find out, maybe your speaking partner tells you, or maybe you look it up and you find out that it's hice. And so now you can complete your thought and say, hice ejercicio ayer a las 4. And then, since hice is your vocabulary word of the moment, maybe you can continue practicing, talking about other things that you have done to continue to practice that word. Hice la cena anoche, hice una presentación la semana pasada en el trabajo, hice un poco de trabajo en mi jardín. Okay, so hice is transferring from your passive memory to your active memory. But what if instead of taking that approach, you go down the rabbit hole of verb conjugations and you say, okay, I can't remember how to say I did. Okay, it's hice. Oh, come to find out, I can't remember how to say anything like he did, she did, we did, they did. Okay, so obviously my knowledge of the past preterite of hacer is extremely limited. So let me just get out the list. Hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicieron. And so you're just drilling yourself. And then tomorrow you can't even remember how to say hice. And that was the one that you actually needed in the moment to be able to express yourself. What I want to get across to you is that I want you to have as much grace with yourself with verbs as you do with any vocabulary words. If you learn a couple of new words related to cooking, do you find them useless because you don't know all of the words related to cooking that you could possibly need? Probably not. Right now, I'm learning a whole new set of vocabulary related to construction because we're building a house here in Mexico. These are words that I am not familiar with in English or Spanish, so it has been quite interesting.
Parte que se ve ahí excavada, donde van a hacer los cimientos. Para hacer una casa se llama esto zapata corrida. Le ponen concreto, varillas y de ahí le ponen los armes de varillas para que pueda hacer una casa que pueda aguantar 2 pisos y pueda estar bien cimentada.
So it has been quite interesting for me and really, really fun to learn a bunch of new words. And believe you me, I am celebrating every new one I learn. But trust me, I am not ready to come to you and have an intelligent conversation about house construction. Not yet. Give me a few months, guys. But even so, I consider every single new word I learn as a win. And I want you to do the same exact thing with verb conjugations. Think of them as just another word and practice them individually in the same way that you would vocabulary. Language cannot be crammed in, and that's why our trying to learn through list that we're like, okay, they've put it all there for us. Surely I can just learn it this way. It just doesn't work. It's not natural. It's not how we learn language. So this approach of really taking it one word at a time, and you may think, oh, it's going to be so slow. It'll only be so slow if you don't expose yourself enough to Spanish or if you don't practice enough. Because trust me, you're going to pick up on so much through simple exposure to the point where you're actually not going to need to individually practice every single verb conjugation. You're going to be speaking more confidently because the words that you need, you are slowly acquiring them without forgetting them. And then so many other words are just going to come naturally because the patterns that you're subconsciously going to be picking up. In summary, instead of trying to memorize lists, instead of trying to obsess about all of the tenses and the moods that you are not a master of yet, start with context that you actually need. Take this context, this theme-based approach, language, it is going to be so much easier and more enjoyable for you. Now, I'm going to be going into more detail in a future video about exactly how to do this with the themes. So make sure you don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed and that you've hit the notification bell so that you don't miss it. If you enjoy story-based context and you think that applying what I've just described through stories sounds really fun and appealing to you, then go ahead and download my free guide, How to Master Spanish with Stories, to learn how to do it. That's all for today, guys. And remember, don't forget to go out and live a new experience with your new language today. Hasta la próxima.